If you've ever wanted to draw a character in like a super cool pose, but every time you try and draw it, it just doesn't turn out right, I want to share with you a method that I've been using to really help me learn anatomy and also draw more difficult poses. Because anytime that poses has like a weird perspective, my brain just turns to jelly. So here's what I do to combat that. So to start, we are going to scour the internet for the perfect pose. I like to use Pinterest for this. I have a whole Pinterest board full of reference photos, and anytime I see a super cool pose or like one that's got a cool perspective, I like to add it to a Pinterest board. That way I can just easily have a selection to find. For this video, I'm going to be using this reference photo. I chose this photo because I really like the perspective. And the first thing we're going to do is trace directly over our reference photo. I feel like a lot of artists think that tracing is like illegal or something. You definitely don't want to like trace a pose and then like post it online and, say that you did it yourself. That's not cool. What we're doing here is using tracing as a learning tool. Tracing is really good for building muscle memory. So you're kind of training your hand and your brain to remember how to make these shapes that you're tracing over. So the focus here is to break down the structure of the form and turn it and break it down into really basic shapes. So we're trying to use rectangles and circles and just see if we can break down what's going on in the photo. You can be super like detailed and careful in this stage or more like quick and messy. That's where I tend to fall, is just doing like really rough sketches. Another thing to pay attention to is where things overlap. So like especially around the joints, because like whenever the knee is bent, you can see in the legs, in one leg, the thigh is overlapping the calf, but in the other leg, the calf looks like it's overlapping the thigh. So that's just something to keep in mind. And depending on your perspective, you just kind of want to pay attention to these things because they'll come in handy later whenever we actually start drawing our character. And once we finish tracing over the reference, we're going to draw the reference again, but this time we're going to draw it beside the photo. So we're not going to trace this time. We are still using really basic shapes, but the goal this time is to just kind of see where things are in relation to each other. We're trying to get our proportions right here. Like, for example, you can see the person's elbows. Like in my reference photo, you can see the elbows. One is a little bit higher than the other one. I want to try and portray that in my drawing. And that's kind of the thought process during this phase, is just try and get things in proportion. If you are kind of a perfectionist and want to get it really, really accurate, instead of erasing every time it's not right, I would recommend using the liquify tool to save yourself a little bit of trouble, because nobody wants to redraw the same thing 20 times. And once we have that done, we can move on to the fun part, which is drawing our character. So I like to start with a very basic kind of gesture sketch here. This is just getting the general idea of where things are going to go, where I'm going to place things. And this is going to be different from the previous step that we just did, because now I'm more focused on stylizing. So in the previous one, we wanted to get our proportions accurate to what we saw. But in this step, we're going to exaggerate those a little bit. Things can still be in proportion, but we're also going to exaggerate those proportions a little bit, just depending on your style, really. If you tend to do a more realistic style, then it's going to be pretty close to the proportions that you see in the reference photo. But if you go more anime, the proportions are going to be different than what you see in the reference. So you'll see as I'm kind of doing this sketch, I'm starting to exaggerate things a little bit more than what you see in the reference. And the cool thing about doing it this way is now that we've already drawn this pose twice, it's a lot less intimidating. So now that we're actually drawing a character in that pose, it's far less intimidating because we've already drawn the pose twice, right? And we've broken down the structure and the forms and how everything looks. And we have a better understanding of what the pose should look like. And now we just add our character to it because we know where things kind of are in relation to each other. We've also sort of built up that muscle memory in our hand from already drawing it a couple of times, that now it's a lot less intimidating and we've already seen it before, right? And now I'm going to just go over my sketch with a final line art. I tried to keep it pretty accurate to the sketch here. Again, I did stylize some things, but I think the trick to stylizing and still making your anatomy look right is just especially paying attention to the overlaps, like I was talking about earlier, If you can get those right in your final drawing, I think it really helps with like your anatomy, even if it's stylized, looking like it's accurate. And here's my final drawing. If you'd like some specific anatomy exercises that you can do, especially for beginners to learn anatomy, I recommend you check out this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!